Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes from February 26, 2018?
Motion to approve the minutes from February 26, 2018.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll move on to Dr. MURSD's presentation of the budget.
Good evening, everyone. I feel like I could probably just use my teacher voice. I don't know if I need this microphone. What? There's always somebody. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of our members of the Mendon Upton Regional School District leadership team who are here this evening, and especially our Director of Finance and Operations, Jay Byer, and also the members of the Mendon Upton Regional School Committee on a whole, but also the Budget Subcommittee, which worked in conjunction with both of our community's finance committees to craft this proposed budget, which I'm about to present. First and foremost, as we do every year, and I think really one of the solid underpinnings of any budgetary process is to have distinct goals of the budgetary process. So when our budget subcommittee met for the first time right before Thanksgiving, they crafted these three essential goals. First and foremost, to maintain level services. That means keeping the existing programs, staff, and services that we have in place commensurate with our student enrollment in place. Second, if you look at our vision is about excellence, innovation, and continuous improvement, and keeping that ongoing cycle of continuous improvement across the district. And then last but not least, something that I see as a perpetual goal, and I believe on my watch always has existed, is to look for efficiencies and to pursue cost savings wherever we can, realizing that our resources, both at the state and local levels, clearly are finite. So where are we as a district? I think it's always important with each budget cycle to take stock of where we are. And in my humble opinion, the state of our district is strong. At present time, I would invite you to look at the data for all four of our schools and for the district that is contained within this document. We maintain a fairly good place as far as looking at our class sizes across the levels, class sizes that definitely do permit individualization and personalized learning. We also have really had a run of unprecedented success here at Nipmuc Regional High School across every aspect of the school. Academically, our performance has never been higher. If you look at the success of both our extra and co-curricular programs, and then recently our athletic programs, as just measured simply by the amount of championships and league championships and playoff appearances, but probably more importantly, the culture and the change of the culture of the athletic program. We have something that I consider to be a good problem in the sense that we actually have an enrollment increase here at Nipmuc Regional. The difference between 16-17 and 17-18 on the magnitude of approximately 40 students because of increased matriculation from grade 8. Really pleased with a new leadership team spearheaded by Jen Mannion at Misco Hill Middle School, where there's been a real emphasis on the growth mindset and really culture building and giving our students increased voice and agency. And then, as always, part of the mission of our two elementary schools, Clough and Memorial, is that strong early foundation in literacy and numeracy. That really has to be the foundation of what we do in our schools. However, with that said, I see more and more of an emphasis of our teachers really stretching their practice and really pushing more project-based learning for that deep, getting those deep and meaningful connections. As one of our major strategic initiatives has been over the last 5 years, we're seeing more and more growth with the inclusion model for our students with special needs, getting their instruction, getting their core academic content in the context of the regular classroom and not through a pull-out model. And then something that has been a key initiative over the last 3 years has been SEL, or social emotional learning. Ensuring that kids have the types of programs that really lead to pro-social behaviors has also been an emphasis across the elementary, middle, and high school, as evidenced by a lot of programs that we've had that have had a lot of success. In fact, this week at the middle school, we're in the midst of Wellness Week, where we're promoting various wellness programs. So with all these pieces in place, we are in a terrific place to start with a brand new strategic planning process. In fact, a week from tonight, a team of parents, teachers, administrators, and students will commence the strategic planning process for a new 5-year plan. I would invite you to go to our website and take a look at our 2013 to 2018 strategic plan, entitled Forward, and look at the many successes that we've had in that blueprint in envisioning the future. So I think one of the very first things that you have to take a look at when you are building a budget, obviously, is looking at your present enrollment and then projecting forward what we're looking at for next year. So for this current, our official October 1st, 2017 enrollment, we're here under 2,300 students at 2,296. We are projecting about 40 fewer, 2,253. We get from a organization known as NESDEC, which is the New England Staff Development Council, our enrollment projections, which really largely look at birth rates in both of our communities. And I'll show you a slide in a couple minutes. And there was actually quite a dip from 2012 to 2013. There isn't a very large mobility in and out of our two communities, so birth rate is really that predominant marker. So I'll show you that in a minute, and we've actually commenced the kindergarten enrollment process both at Clough and Memorial, and we're actually seeing that come to fruition based upon our current enrollments. I put the statistics at the bottom of that screen. Based upon our enrollment between the two communities, that's how we break down the local assessments. So at present time, roughly 55-56% of our students are from Upton, and roughly 44 to 45% of our students are from Mendon. So as I was saying, this is the data that we get in our enrollment projections. As you can see, over time, the blue line represents births in a community, and the green line with the squares represents the actual kindergarten enrollment 5 years after the fact. So as you can see, we did have a spike in births from 2011 to 2012. Therefore, our kindergarten enrollment also spiked from 16 to 17. And then you see that decline in births from 12 to 13, and hence kindergarten enrollment from 17 to 18. Okay? It's not a perfect alignment, but it generally over time aligns. So in the larger scheme, in looking at projected enrollment and historical figures, you can see where the district was approximately 10 years ago. Approximately 10 years ago, we were in the ballpark of about 2,600, 2,650 students. We're right now around 2,300. As you can see over time, it's not dramatic, but you see that gentle sloping downward as far as enrollment. Now keep in mind, this does not account for, say there's going to be this enormous housing boom in the next 2 to 5 years and new developments move into both communities. This is just looking at birth rates, and then obviously beyond 5 years is very, very difficult to project. So looking at our average class sizes across the district, as you can see, for the most part, they've been status quo. There are variations from grade to grade, but as you can see, at the early elementary, we like to keep them in that ballpark of 20 to 22. At Misco Hill tends to generally have the highest average class sizes for the simple reason of the team structure, and it's a very efficient model. And then at the high school, there's variations. There was a slight increase this year because of the increased matriculation from grade 8 to grade 9. So in the budget document that you have before us, as far as the bottom line for the FY19 budget, it is, in my humble opinion, a very conservative budget. It is a $35,193,217 proposal. That is a 2.14% increase over our current fiscal year's budget. It will maintain level services and address some targeted needs that we have across the district, and maintains reasonable class sizes, and as I said before, builds upon the district's focus on continual improvement. So really there's two houses of any budget. There is the expenditures, what's driving the budget, and then there's the projected revenue. First, I'll talk a little bit about the expenditure side. So the very first two things that drive your budget the most, obviously, are salary and benefits. So our salary increase that's built in represents $664,267. That is for all of our employees across the district. Overall, that salary line is a 3.46% increase because that would include steps and lanes. All of our associations, with the exception of one, are receiving a 2.15% cost of living adjustment. As far as employee benefits, the largest one is obviously our health care insurance. We've budgeted a 3.9% increase, and that 3.9% increase really represents the increase for retirees and also a small adjustment for anticipated changes in plans. Those usually younger employees who are going from an individual plan to a family plan. The good news is we did lock in before the holidays at a 0% increase for our active employees for health care insurance. Another driver is the Worcester County Retirement Assessment. The Worcester County Retirement is for our employees that are not part of the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement Program. We've had a spike in recent years, over the last 3 years, increases in the magnitude of about 10%. And this year there's no change, it's about a 9.3% increase. As far as transportation, as far as our regular transportation, the buses that bring our children to school, we're in the second year of a 3-year contract with Telstone and Son. This second year is a 5.2% increase, which is $81,200, but markedly larger is a 13.9% increase in special ed transportation. This would be transportation for students with significant needs that are in out-of-district placements. As far as student services, a modest increase as far as our out-of-district tuitions of about $44,000. We're projecting our number of out-of-district placements, which is 31, to maintain that same number. But something that's a significant driver that I'd like to talk about briefly is that increase in non-resident vocational tuition of about $156,000. Okay, this is a significant increase, and it's part of a larger trend, and I could point it specifically to one school, Norfolk Aggie. Okay? If you look, 7 years ago, which was my first year as superintendent, we had 2 students attending Norfolk Aggie. This current school year, we now have 15. So you might be saying, well, so what's the big deal about that? Well, the regional school district has to absorb the cost for these students. So my first year, for those 2 students, the cost was $43,872. Now with 15 students, it's $358,215. This is very, very significant. To put that in perspective, that is over 1% of our total budget goes towards 15 students. Now, to be very, very clear, I completely support these students. These are our kids, and if they want to access that type of education, I completely support it. However, what is wrong here is the funding mechanism, okay? So you might be saying, well, how much does each kid cost? Each student, we're billed $22,149 this year. If the student receives special education services, it's an additional $4,300. So for 6 of them, we're being billed at $26,000. And again, that's absorbed by the regional school district budget. It's contained within this budget. So you might be saying, well, what happens? Do these kids get any state aid? The state aid is paid directly to the towns. It's not paid to our regional school district. So as you can see, in green, that's how much our 2 communities have been reimbursed in state aid. If you look at it, it's a very, very small fraction of what we're paying. Okay, so I bring this point up to show that this is an issue that has been mounting. And again, in the big scheme of things, you might be saying, well, 15 students out of 2,300, it's something that has become extremely costly. So another thing as far as a driver that we've partnered with here, really, I first should say, for all intents and purposes, our buildings and grounds lines, for the most part, are level funded. Modest increase in utilities because we're starting to see natural gas prices rise along with electricity. And then we've also put an additional increase of $10,000 towards a contribution for a full-time school resource officer for our 2 schools in Mendon. At present time, we have 2 school resource officers. We've got Carl Ambrosino, who is in Upton. He serves this school, Memorial Elementary School in BVT, as a full-time position. Right now, Mendon has Eddie Pokernicki, who is kind of in a part-time role as a school resource officer for Misco and Clough. The idea would be to share the finances between the regional school district and the town of Mendon and have a full-time officer that their job during the school year would be nothing more than tending to those two schools. As far as technology, it is very much status quo, and two of our big line items there are the continuation of the lease that we have in place for our smart boards, which are largely in our elementary classrooms, and then also continuation of our desktops and laptops for our staff across the district. As far as textbook and instructional supplies, we're actually down approximately $115,000 on a whole, largely because of the maturation of our lease payments for our digital texts at the secondary level, because many of our texts at the secondary level are digital through the iPads. But there's also some new purchases that are related to, for grades 1 and 2, having classroom sets of leveled readers, which are aligned with our literacy series, and then also some various apps such as Brain Pop, Mystery Science, and Seesaw, which are also being used at the elementary level. So overall, and I believe if you look in the budget summary book on page 5, you will see the overall summary that in all of our major categories, our net increase from FY18 to the proposed FY19 is $737,384, which translates to a 2.14%. This basically shows what happens with regard to, again, different colors represent the state codes as far as budget categories, but if you look at by far the largest represents 52, which is instructional services, which kind of speaks to what's happening in the classroom as far as our teachers, our instructional staff, and our supplies. So now the second piece is the revenue side and what we're anticipating right now. Now keep in mind, we're very, very early in the process. We use the governor's state funding numbers, and those come out always the third Wednesday in January. We have to, as a school committee, approve the budget this evening by charter, that it has to be 40 days before our town meetings. So it's still early, and there's still a process to go as far as the state numbers, but this is where we are right now. So first, as far as our state aid, the main avenue of state aid is something known as Chapter 70 aid. The proposed increase in Chapter 70 is $20 per student. So that translates to an additional $43,440. Our next major strand of state aid is regional transportation reimbursement. Being a regional school district, we're reimbursed for how much we pay for busing, because by law, we cannot charge people for busing like non-regional school districts do. So that's being reimbursed at a level rate, which is 65%, only 65%. So that increase is $28,318. As far as net charter reimbursement, that's really minimal between our two communities. I think we have a grand total of only 6 students accessing charter schools. So the net as far as our increase in state aid is real minimal. It's only $75,628, which is a whopping 0.57%. So as you can see from that very paltry sum, just for a modest increase in our overall budget, the onus falls on our local communities. So right now, according to the state funding formula, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, something known as the MLC, or the minimal local contribution to Mendon, is increasing by a very high percentage, 6.29%, which is $398,264. In this budget proposal, we are requesting an additional $295,974 from the town of Mendon. Upton also has a fairly large minimum local contribution, also over, actually pushing 7%, 6.9%. Their MLC increases by $520,330. The school committee is requesting an additional $395,589 in the operational assessment. As far as district receipts, we use some of our own district receipts in spelling out how the budget breaks down. We are essentially keeping those status quo from the current fiscal year, where we'll be allocating $400,000 from E&D, which is excess and deficiency. It's essentially free cash that we have from previous fiscal years. And then $150,000 from revolving accounts. And essentially that would be before and after school care, and then also our pre-K program. As far as choice, we're actually increasing that from FY18 to FY19 by $100,000, from $600,000 to $700,000, for the simple reason that we actually have an increase of students choicing in and a decrease of students choicing out. As of October 1st, we have 162 students choicing into our district, and we only have 35 choicing out. So overall, our total district receipts is $650,000. So in breaking this down, as far as looking at our sources of how we put the budget together, only about 38% of all of our money comes directly from the state. Okay, and if you put together Mendon and Upton's contribution, it's approximately 60 to 61%. Okay, to put things in perspective, when I started as superintendent 7 years ago, state aid was about 48%. Okay, so it keeps diminishing and diminishing and diminishing each year. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, at present time, the expenditures and the revenue do match, and the anticipated revenue, as you see also on page 5 of the budget document, is an increase in revenue of $737,383, which again is a 2.14% increase. So I think it's important again to reiterate, and this is on the page 6 of your document, of how it breaks down as far as, sorry about that. As far as how it breaks down by the community. Again, here is your minimum local contribution of $398 to Mendon, but the actual request is $295,974, which is a 3.33% increase. Again, now looking at Upton, the operational assessment is $395,589, which is a 3.69% increase in what the town of Upton is giving the regional school district. So if I could, and I usually, again, not to get completely into the weeds about state funding and minimum local contributions, I do think it's important in simple layman's terms to kind of understand how the state funds education and how it determines how much communities should be paying towards it, or at least on paper. So they use something that they term as target share. And this really now goes back 11 years when the state redid its funding formula. And they basically said, okay, target share is a percentage which is put down of how much a community should contribute to public education. And really, two factors are looked at. What is the aggregate property value in the community, and what are the aggregate personal income levels based upon taxation for the previous fiscal years. Together, they're put together in a formula which is known as MRGF, which stands for Municipal Revenue Growth Factor. So there really is a method behind the madness, and the overall goal in looking at all 351 communities, 351 communities, is that local communities should cover about 59%, and state aid should cover about 41%. So if you were to take a look at all of the communities in the Commonwealth, the low end is Lawrence. They only have to contribute 13.79%. And there's 146 communities that are at the cap. And the cap is you have to contribute 82.5%. Okay? So here are our local neighboring communities. Bless you. And you can see, based upon their wealth, what their target share is. What percentage should they be contributing according to the state funding formula? Okay, only one of our neighbors, Hopkinton, is at the cap, but you can see other communities like Westboro, 79.75%. They're pushing up towards it. It wouldn't shock me if in the matter of 2 or 3 years they'd be at the cap. So your question is, gee, what's the target share for Mendon and Upton, right? So for FY19, the target share for Mendon is just a hair under 75%, and for Mendon, it's a little under 71%, okay? So in actually contributing using the target share numbers, Mendon will still be below, and Upton will still be below. Mendon will be slightly farther away from the target share. Realize Mendon and Upton are 2 of the 82 communities that are not at target share. Okay, there's actually communities like very close, Milford, which is significantly higher than target share. Okay, to be fair to our 2 communities, it's a little bit like a moving goalpost, because realize the state recalculates target share on an annual basis. When I gave this presentation 2 years ago, both of our communities were in the high 60s. So it changes from year to year based upon the recalculation, but also the relative wealth of the community. Okay? Keep in mind, I think, too, this target share number, I use the term MLC, or minimum local contribution. It also determines what they put in as far as the minimum local contribution for a community. So really some closing thoughts with regard to where we are. I see this year's budget, I see it as the 3 R's. I genuinely do. I think it's responsive, it's result-oriented, but I also think it is fiscally responsible. And I feel like we as a school district and our regional school committee have very, very good communication and relationship with both of our communities. And that is a lot of behind-the-scenes type conversations and working with each other. And this is a fiscally responsible budget, but I feel like it'll sustain our district. However, I do want to say that I have concerns moving forward, for the simple reason that you can keep a 2% budget going only so long. Keep in mind, if you looked at the FY18 budget, and I would invite you to go to our website, and all of these documents are for this year and last fiscal year are on the website, we had a 2.37% increase, okay? You are not in growth mode when you have very, very modest increases like that, okay? I have a lot of faith in our teachers, our staff, our leadership team, as far as their intrinsic motivation to improve our schools. But I would not, by any means, term this as an aspirational budget, okay? It's basically holding on to what we have in place. I see moving forward for 2020, short of some type of infusion of state funding. You know, you may be cognizant that on the ballot, in all likelihood, in November, will be something known as the Fair Share Amendment. Sometimes it's referred to as the millionaire's tax, because what it would do is it would increase the personal income tax of people earning over $1 million by 4%, and it's estimated that that would bring in $1.9 billion more each fiscal year, and that $1.9 billion would be earmarked for education and transportation. So in that event, could we be looking at a greater infusion of state aid? Hopefully. Also right now pending within the Senate of our legislature is coming up with a 5-year plan to implement something known as the Foundation Budget Review Commission. 2 years ago, a commission was formed of educators, of legislators, of people across the state to kind of look at the funding formula. And their conclusion was we underfund education by at least $2 billion annually across the Commonwealth. So the question is, okay, thanks for the report. We appreciate that. How are we going to actually move forward incrementally to better fund education? So, as I say, if there is no additional funding, I have great concerns about maintaining level services for next fiscal year, the one after FY19, FY20, and beyond that. So my recommendation would be, after our annual town meetings, let's think long and hard about reviving the multi-board and working with both of our communities' boards of selectmen to proactively plan for FY20 and beyond. So I think the bottom line, as I said before, is we've accomplished a great deal, particularly within the last 5 years. And I think that's by and large the strength of people working together. Our outstanding teachers, our outstanding staff, our parents, all coming together as a community. And, you know, what you see there is our vision statement from our last strategic plan, that we would be a model regional school community known for those 3 things: excellence, innovation, and the cycle of continuous improvement. I have a high degree of confidence that it's a nonstop process. By and large, we've gotten there, but we never rest on our laurels. So keep in mind, as it is every year, the budget process is very, very fluid. We're basically approving, certifying a budget to be sent to our 2 communities for town meeting this evening. But keep in mind, things could still change, particularly on the state funding side. Usually mid-April is when the House releases its budget, and then in mid-May, the Senate releases its budget. Over the last 3 to 4 years, the budget has not been finalized, usually until July 15th or so. And then we have a solid idea as far as the state funding. So with that said, that is an overview of the FY19 budget proposal. I would be happy to take any questions first from the school committee.
We've been looking at it for a little while.
You certainly have.
So this isn't a first pass, this is several versions, and And I guess my thoughts are, if you look at the funding side of it, it paints the picture of why we're at where we're at. So I feel like, based on what we're getting from state aid and what we're trying to do creatively to maintain everything that we're doing, it's a common sense budget.
One thing that might be useful to mention is weren't there two categories of statutory reimbursement for districts that the state is not fulfilling?
Sure.
Special education and transportation.
Yeah, so great point, Sean. So I mentioned one of our major strands of state aid is regional transportation reimbursement. So believe it or not, by law, regional school districts are supposed to get 100% of their busing fees reimbursed. Okay, we're at 65%. In the height of the recession, it dipped down to, what was it, Jay, 50, maybe high 40s? The highest it's ever been since it's been law, since the 1970s, has been 90%, okay? So keep in mind, when Senator Mike Moore, who represents Upton, came here 2 weeks ago to our last school committee meeting, the school committee brought that to his attention. So keep in mind, if you increase the reimbursement rate, say from 65 to say 80%, that would represent an additional $150,000 in funding to the regional school district. So every single percentage counts. The second piece is a fund known as Circuit Breaker. Circuit Breaker is also state funding that's a reimbursement for the cost of our out-of-district placements for students that have very substantial needs. By law, it's supposed to be reimbursed at a 75% rate. This year, as far as a mid-year cut, it got cut down to 65%. Okay, so not as substantial, but that still represented a loss in the current fiscal year of approximately $40,000 to the district. So those every little bit pieces where we're not getting that state aid do add up.
So I would just make the comment that as we move forward, if we continue to see this trend where the state is whittling away and shifting its responsibilities to the localities, that it's something that at least I would feel upset about, and I would hope that everybody would feel upset about it as well. This isn't something that came all in a rush and you know, everybody's in an uproar about, but it's happening little by little, year by year. The state is whittling away at the school budgets. So it's something to be upset about as soon as you can be upset about it, so that we can tackle the 2020 budget and beyond.
Are there any questions from the public? Mr. Moroli.
Hello. So my question is, if the foundation budget review committee's recommendations weren't implemented, but an additional source of revenue, such as the millionaire's tax, was implemented, what chance would it have to actually make a significant impact on school aid?
That's a great question. The real cynical part of me says, don't expect that they would both happen. It might be, hey, we're gonna implement the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations, and oh, by the way, we're going to use the Fair Share Amendment, millionaire's tax money to implement them. I can't predict that right now because it is, I think probably will go hand in glove with the FBRC recommendations being implemented would be a restructuring of the actual funding formula. They probably would restructure the 2007 formula. So I can't necessarily guarantee it would mean X amount of additional state funds or X percentage of funds coming to Mendon Upton. I do think that, to be very frank though, a source of concern would be, say we do get the fair share amendment, or we do get FBRC. We're still, under the current formula, one of those 82 communities that's below target share. So I don't think we can necessarily say, oh, okay, this is going to happen, and therefore we're going to get our pot of gold. I think, we might find a little relief along with other communities, but I don't think it's necessarily a panacea. Yes?
How can the taxpayers influence the state government to up their reimbursement for the busing?
I think what is very, very helpful would be to solicit our local legislators, okay? If you live in Upton, your representative is David Meridian, and your senator is Michael Moore. If you live in Mendon, your representative is Brian Murray, and your senator is Ryan Fatman. I generally find anytime I contact any of the four of them, they're very, very responsive. It's a heck of a lot more responsive than, trying to contact, Representative McGovern, who's, your rep in Congress. I think they also very much have the mindset, if I hear from 5 citizens on a key issue, then that represents X number of my constituency. So I will gladly send out a Blackboard Connect mass email to all of our parents with their email addresses and kind of giving, some sample bullet points of things to advocate as we go through first the House and then the Senate budget process. Shelley.
I have a question.
Sure.
With the target share contributions, I seem to recall in the past, if we get to that target share, we get an additional perk, I think it was, from the state. Am I correct?
No, it's actually, we punish you less if you're there. It's like, you don't have to say, thank you, sir, may I have another anymore. Would be the best analogy, yeah. And right now, there's still, here, let me go back to the slide. So see what they do, because if you're at 2% or more, see in the red, away from target share, they actually add to your minimum local contribution by a full percentage point. If you were closer to it, they don't add that additional line. And again, to be very, very fair, I can't stress enough, target share is a moving target, okay? But the flip side of it is it's a moving target based upon the relative wealth of your community.
So my question is there a way to get that percentage even smaller, to get less of a penalty? Why are we going in so much lower than the 0? Why go for the 2.29? Why try not to get to the 0 or higher?
Okay, you could, but I'm going to tell you this, it also would represent overwhelmingly, you do one of 2 things. You have a significant Proposition 2.5 override within the community, or you completely dominate and take away from town services and put it to the regional school district. Do one of 2 things. I mean, I think the core of the matter, and I think everybody in this room knows this, the core of the matter of our 2 communities is the actual amount of tax levy that's available, okay? Let me put this in perspective for people. And I'm saying this as the superintendent of the town. I'm not, of the regional school district. I'm not saying this as a town official. We're asking Upton to give us an increase of 3.69%. We're asking Mendon to give us an increase of 3.33%. Okay, you guys probably all know Proposition 2.5 says you can only increase the tax levy by 2.5% each year. It's tax limiting. Okay, in a perfect world, and Mr. Flaherty is here, he's the chair of the Upton FinCon, he's a wonderful guy. I'm not just saying that, even if he wasn't here, I would say he was a wonderful guy. In a perfect world, I come in with a budget that's 2.5%. I can't do that. I can't. Okay, so it's a real challenge, and it's like most things in life, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act of what we're doing on our side, but it's a balancing act in working with both of our towns. I'll get off my soapbox. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, it's now time for us to certify the budget. We will need to make a number of motions tonight to get the budget certified. The first motion to set the operational budget. May I have that motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion to set the operational budget for the Mendon-Upton Regional School District for the 2018-2019 fiscal year at $35,193,216. That consists of general operations within the levy limit of $34,299,767 and debt service outside the levy limit of $893,449.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The second motion is to assess the town of Mendon. May I read that?
I make a motion to assess the town of Mendon $9,602,787. That consists of the following: minimum local contribution of $6,729,333. Non-discretionary charges of $698,710,000. Discretionary charges of $1,745,008. Long-term debt for Clough and Memorial School at $359,668,000. Long-term debt at Misco for the Misco Green repair of $70,069.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The third motion is to assess the town of Upton. Someone make that motion, please? I don't like doing it.
Okay, I make a motion to assess the town of Upton $11,592,059. That consists of the following: a minimum local contribution of $8,057,016. Non-discretionary charges, $878,157. Discretionary charges of $2,193,173. Long-term debt to Clough and Memorial School, $376,232. And long-term debt, Misco Green repair of $87,480.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The fourth motion, please, is to appropriate state aid.
I make a motion to appropriate $13,348,370 from state aid that consists of the following: Chapter 70 funds of $12,360,916, regional transportation reimbursement of $977,333, and a charter school tuition reimbursement of $10,121.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And the last motion tonight is to appropriate school district resources.
I make a motion to appropriate $650,000 from the following school district sources: excess and deficiency fund, $400,000, vision sped tuition, $75,000, transfer in from revolving accounts, $150,000, and Medicaid reimbursements of $25,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is discussion for the March 14th, Men's March Youth Empowered.
Thank you. I thought it was very timely to use this meeting to also add this item because, as I'm sure everybody knows, this coming Wednesday, March 14th, there is a nationally planned event known as the National March. It's a school-wide walkout to take place at 10 o'clock for 17 minutes in commemoration of the 17 victims of the tragic shooting in Parkland, Florida. I think there's a great deal of misinformation that has been disseminated, particularly on social media. So I thought it was important to have a few clarifying comments, largely from our middle school principal, Jen Mannion, and our high school principal, John Clements. First and foremost, I want to say there's absolutely no plans whatsoever to have anything happen in our 2 elementary schools. I think it's very, very clear, and I think it's very much a common sense proposition that these students are very, very young, and it clearly wouldn't be appropriate, at least in my opinion. I think with regard to our middle school and our high school, it's different as far as the age and the appropriateness of our students. And I think we're in a little bit of new territory here. I think the guiding principle for both Jen and John is to honor student voice, to honor student agency, to have something that's very respectful while acknowledging that this is something that's happening, but also, first and foremost, to keep all of our students safe and to have a natural construct around what, if anything, happens. So with that said, I'd like first Jen to talk a little bit about where she is and keeping in mind that she, when this kind of came out and became public, she was actually approached by students in her student council that asked both she and Paul Marshall about it. So Jen, if you could say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. The reason I'm here at MISCO is because I love to work with the middle school mind. I love the joys and the challenges that it brings, and this experience certainly has brought us plenty of both. Our intention, as we identified in our school improvement plan this fall, was to really increase student agency at MISCO and to engage a student voice as much and as often as possible. And when this challenge came to us from the students, they had heard about the walkout through social media. And one of my action steps in increasing student agency is to meet with the e-board members from our student council weekly. And I typically start out by saying, hey, what's on your mind? What's the buzz around school? Because I like to keep a pulse of what's going on and see how I can support what they're thinking about. So some of them immediately said, have you heard about the walkout? And I said, yeah, I have. What have you heard? And we talked it out a little bit. And I said, what are you thinking? And they had a plan that they had come up with amongst themselves that was more in an act of remembrance and honoring the victims. So we talked about their role in student government and the importance of engaging the voice of their peers rather than making plans based on their own opinions and values at that time. So we met the student council as a whole and talked about how do you solicit feedback in a way that doesn't drive your own agenda, but really tries to get the thinking of the people that you are representing. And they created a system for doing so. They created slides because one of the students said that it's important that their message was consistent in the classrooms, and created questions that they wanted to ask students, and then set a schedule for themselves to get into homerooms. And we communicated to the staff and gave them a few days to do that work. And following that, I sent a communication to the parent community, which in hindsight should have gone sooner. I was holding out a little bit to see what they were going to come up with so I'd have something more concrete to share, but that thinking was flawed. I should have communicated earlier around what the conversation was going on at MISCO, so that's a learning piece for me. And then our follow-up meeting with student council was delayed and delayed and delayed due to snow. So we met with them this morning and had an interesting dialogue. They were unanimous in their decision that we should do something. That was the first question, was do you want to engage in this in any way, or do you want to not engage? And if you choose to engage, what's the intention? And if that's your intention, what should our actions look like so that they match our intentions? And how do we create an environment, regardless of what we choose, that's inclusive of the viewpoints of all the kids in the school? So they decided, then the feedback was pretty mixed from that point. They felt they wanted to act, but there was a split. Some students are steadfast in their conviction that they feel it's a time to protest. Some students really feel strongly about acting in remembrance and solidarity. And some really feel the focus should be safety at MISCO, and are we doing all we can? Is there more we can do? And there's a handful of students who don't want to participate in any kind of collective action, which is understandable. So we took that feedback. Mr. Marsh and I asked some clarifying questions, probed their thinking, tried to get them to think as deeply as possible. They felt strongly about taking action out of doors, so we pursued that with them. I just said, tell me more, why outside? And they felt that it would draw more attention to the issues that they wanted to draw attention to. So we talked about what is that attention that you want to draw, and then the next question was, whom are you hoping to get that attention from? And their responses got a little vaguer and a little grayer through that line of questioning. So we talked about indoors versus outdoors, and if they choose to do something outdoors, Mr. Marshall and our role shifts to monitoring safety, rather than if it's indoors and it's something collective, we are more part of building community and having a conversation about inclusion. So we, at that point, the e-board members followed us down to the office, and we continued our conversation, calling together all the feedback we had and trying to create something that met the needs of as many learners as possible while keeping everybody safe. So they proposed a meeting. They felt like a big piece of this should be the student body gathered together as a student body. So the idea that they created for that was to have an all-school meeting in our gymnasium prior to the 10 o'clock time scheduled for the nationwide event. And the focus for that piece we thought should be on school safety. What are all the small things we do day in and day out that make MISCO a safe place to learn and be together as a community? And then engage them in feedback around what else could we do? What else is on your minds? What else are you thinking? And talk a little bit about inclusion and what that looks like and what it shouldn't look like if we're not practicing inclusion in our school. And then send them to homerooms where they would like to engage in a 17-minute moment of silence in remembrance. And some students would really like to take action during that time. So one of the things that we had talked about earlier was, what does action look like? Does action mean active protest, or can action mean taking your voice to paper and writing to your legislators, things like that? So during that moment of silence, the intent is to have the email addresses of the state legislators available to students. So if some want to write letters during that time, they may do so. A student suggested we have the address for Parkland School so that students who want to do an act of remembrance and solidarity can write cards, notes, letters, draw pictures if they want. Students can sit in silence. Students who just want to read a book or draw a picture and not engage are able to do so. And everybody will just be engaged in similar activities, so nobody hopefully will stand out. So we feel like that is, it's a doable plan. It's not a perfect plan, but we built it with kids and we're feeling good about that. And the last piece is that we do still have a contingent of students who are convicted, showing their convictions in terms of planning to walk out of the building. So we've partnered with Menton Police around how to maintain their safety. We've designated an area that we feel that we can do that. Won't share that now. We're going to keep that to ourselves for a while. But they will have a presence at our school that day so that no matter what students choose, we're able to identify the learning, support the learning, and keep kids safe in what we feel is going to be an inclusive way. So if anybody has questions or comments.
Thank you. Actually, I'd like to now, John Clements, the principal of Nipmuc High School, talk a little bit about what your thinking and what your planning with students has been.
Thank you, Dr. Muschek. I think, like all of us at NITMUC, we've been continually reminded that, like schools all across the country, we've been affected in a lot of different emotional ways. And since February 14th, we've been thinking a lot about school safety, about the people in Parkland, but also about what we can do to keep our own schools safe. So I reached out to parents at the beginning of last week and held a school-wide conversation at the end of the day on Tuesday. We had about 50 people show up. A lot of student leaders showed up, a lot of faculty members, had our school resource officer there. As I said in the meeting, I think when we're talking about these things, we're stronger, we're safer, we're healthier. And we're not talking about it, then we're not addressing the realities. And I was just so impressed with the conversation that we had that day as we talked about three main questions. First one was, how are we doing? You know, how emotionally, how are we? How has it impacted you here in this school community? The second one was, what can we do to keep NITMUC safe? What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What recommendations do you have? And we got a great list of feedback of things we could do, little things, as Mrs. Mannion said, to keep ourselves safer. And the last piece was sort of in response to student conversations, faculty conversations I had, and emails I've been receiving. And what's the voice of NITMUC in all of this? What impact are our students looking to have? We obviously heard about the walkout. There's not been an overwhelming groundswell of interest in the walkout, but at the same time, I know a number of students were interested in it, and so I felt like it was important for us to talk about it and have some conversation. So tomorrow I'll be sending out an email to all parents with sort of a summary of our conversations as a faculty in the school community and some of the steps we've taken to put in place to make sure kids are safe, that their voices are respected, and that we have as little disruption to the school day as we can have. Still a day of learning for us, and the 17-minute moment of silence is something that a lot of kids want to recognize. I think we can do that. We can also honor those kids who do not feel like they want to have participate in that. And so some of the way that we're doing that is at NITMUC we have small group advisories. They meet every Wednesday. Faculty members have small groups of students that they follow throughout the 4 years. I have a group of about 12 students that I've seen since they were freshmen. All teachers have a small group. So it's faculty members you know well, and you get a chance to process more than just curriculum with. That typically starts at 10:30, and we flip-flopped it with our normal class time, so that will now begin at 10 a.m. and go to 10:30. So the national time schedule for the walkout is going to coincide with our advisory time. I'm glad about that, because for students who want to participate, they won't be leaving instructional time. There's going to be an advisory time. For students who do not want to participate and need to process, they have a teacher, an adult that they know well, that they can have a conversation with, and talk and process. And I think the conversation isn't something we should shy away from. The more we talk about it, the better off we are. Our police department has been phenomenal, and Carl Ambrosino has been phenomenal, our resource officer. He met with us last Tuesday, had a conversation with everyone, and he's going to be there on Wednesday. One of the things we're doing is blocking off the exits to the school during that time period. Whenever we have kids voicing their opinions and doing so in a fairly public way along with the national movement, our number one priority has got to be to keep them safe. So we're going to make sure that we know no other people are going to be coming onto campus. And if a parent were coming on to take their child to a doctor's appointment or something, they're getting a checkpoint from a police officer before they come onto campus. We will do it out in front of the school, out by the flagpole, and allowing the kids who want to participate to walk out, be outside for 17 minutes. When it wraps up, they'll be able to come back into their small group advisory. So they still have a chance to connect with an adult in the school following that. But also the kids who do not want to participate don't have to have that pressure of feeling like they need to leave a class or follow their peers. They're able to stay throughout the day. So, I mean, I think the lesson I'm learning from this is that we got to talk about these things. We've got to be open about it. We've got to look at the tragedy that's taken place and use it as a chance to reflect, to talk about our own values and the strength we have as a community. The kids talked to me last week about how they feel like the relationships we have are wonderful. They're the things that make our school healthy. Some of them felt like Parkland was real far away, and other ones felt like Parkland could be any town USA. It could be Mendon or Upton. In order to make sense of all this, we got to have conversations, and having 14 to 18-year-olds in a school where we can talk about these things is an opportunity we shouldn't miss. So this is not a political day from my standpoint or from any of our teachers' standpoint. This is a day that helping kids however they feel about this, to find their voice, to clarify their voice, to ask questions, and to get support. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Thank you, John. Does anybody on the school committee have a question or a comment?
I'm impressed with the level of student connection that we've given our kids. I think that's important because I think, like John just alluded to, you can't just sweep it under a rug because it happened, and they're smart and they know. They probably know from a very, young age, starting in middle school. And I know we've had those conversations at our dinner table, and I'm certain we're not unique. But the fact that you've invested as much time as you had engaging that student voice because they do want to be heard, I think that's really important. And I actually think that that is one of the purposes of school, is to learn how to speak and be heard, and asking those challenging questions. Well, what is it that you want to say? And how do you want to do it? And are you sure that's, and like having that guidance to get them to the right point, I think is really important. So I appreciate the time and effort that you've put into our students. So thank you.
And I would just add that, one of the focuses that we've had for a while now is around social emotional learning and developing our children to be good citizens, not just good students, right? So the idea that you can teach kids how to react in very emotional and very scary circumstances, to really be accepting of different points of view, different political makeups. What does that really mean to you, and how should you go through a process of breaking down that problem and understanding what the impacts can be? And the fact that we can do that in the school is precious, and it really speaks to the fact that we've got a great community building, and every time we take the chance to have a discussion about these emotional topics, it actually makes the chances of a tragedy happening like that in this school less. So I'm very proud of our response. It's been in alignment with the Association of School Committees guidelines, and we were in alignment with the guidelines before those guidelines got delivered to my house. So I'm really impressed with the response, and I think the kids actually have shown an amazing amount of resilience through this whole thing. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Other topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. At this point, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?